Alright guys, Jay at Broader Performance here. So as promised, I'm gonna do some more on this Cobra build. And I wanted to show you this, so taking you guys in my sanctuary with me today. So here's a great Henry Ford. Some men may succeed because they are destined to, but most men succeed because they are determined to. So keep this in mind during your Cobra kit car project if you're thinking about it or maybe working on one. And let's take a look here. So we've got, this is the Antique and Collectibles Auto Cobra kit. These guys are out of Buffalo, New York, and I am not a paid sponsor or anything like that for them. This is just a project I've always wanted to do, and it was just a bucket list item. You know, I love the car and I love the idea of building one, and I did another video on this car. If you want to go back and reference that, there's some info there on it. And what I'm going to try to do, I did not do YouTube videos at the time that I built this car, so I don't really have any along the way videos or hardly even any pictures. I'm not much of a picture taker. I just kind of get in the moment, and I don't really bother with pictures and things like that, and usually regret it later, but I just always do the same thing. So anyways, I'm going to do this probably the boring way, you know. But I think if you're interested in building one of these cars, especially if it's from Antique and Collectible Autos, hang in with me, because I think some of the information I have might be valuable to you. I'm going to kind of go over mistakes I made, things that I thought were difficult in the kit to do, things that maybe were easy. I'll tell you what's great about this kit. They have different options, but I didn't have to paint this car. This is the way the body came. They had some stock colors you choose from, and I just chose their blue. You can also send them a custom color. I didn't bother with any of that. I just figured the blue's fine for me. So that's what I did. And I'll tell you, if you're not a paint and body guy or don't want the expense of paint and body, because that, my God, is so expensive these days. Even doing it yourself is pretty expensive. This is an easy way out. And the car really, honestly, looks pretty damn good the way it is. I wouldn't have painted it any better. Some people may have, but and this is, you know, it's a little bit on the dull side. It's got a lot of scratches on it from working on it. I have not buffed this or haven't even really ever washed it. I've wiped it down because you get a lot of fiberglass dust on everything. But the car really is pretty good, you know. So if you're not a paint and body guy, this is a huge advantage to going with this particular kit. So my goal with this car was, I wasn't trying to make a super show car out of it. I wanted to make it, and I didn't want anything modern in it. I wanted to make it as close to original as I could, simply because I just wanted to know what it felt like. And I know there's, you know, I've got the FE motor in here. Mine's not actually a 427. I didn't have the money for that. It's a 390, but it looks the same for the most part. And my wife in particular gave me a lot of crap for that. She says, you're going to build a 427 Cobra and you're going to put a 390 in it. And my answer is, the whole car is a fake. What's the difference? there's nothing real about this Cobra, so we're not even going to have a real 427 in it. So anyways, you know, 390 is plenty powerful enough for it, especially this one. This is a pretty stout engine. You know, it's got aluminum heads, and it's just a well-built motor. I got a really good deal on it, so I didn't have to, luckily didn't have to spend a ton of money on it there. I put the original 4-speed top loader in it. I just happened to have one, because that's an expensive transmission these days. But I had it, so that didn't cost me much. So let me go over some of the things that I screwed up on, some of the things that maybe you got to do on yours. So it's a little bit different video than what I've seen everybody else do. Some guys really document the whole build really well, and that's cool. But I think I'm going to try to condense this in about half hour or so, and I may do a part 2 in this, depending on how much I end up rambling on. I'm going to try not to do that. I'm going to just try to stick to the stuff that matters here. But all right, so one thing I did, I had to have the old bias ply tires, and I had to have the actual knockoff wheels. I did not want the wheels that looked like this but took 5 lugs and then had a little cover to hide the lugs. I wanted the real thing. I'm not saying there's anything practical or useful about that, but it's just what I had to do. And I will say this, the rear turned out fine. Now, I bought these wheels from a company that advertised they had the wheels that were the correct offset for this kit, but I had problems. And this being a long-term project, I had the wheels for quite a while before I realized I had a fitment issue and I couldn't return them. But I don't know that that was really much of an option anyways, because I wanted these, you know, I wanted the pin drive wheels. They're more expensive and they're not very practical. But one thing you got to know about these pin drives is they make the wheels stick out away from the frame about 3/8 of an inch. And that was just fine. Everything worked out great in the rear. In the front, I had a problem with the front because when you would look here, you could see about 2 of the treads. I mean, they were just sticking way out, and it looked horrible, and I was pretty bummed out about it. And I know there's different brake kits you can get that change that, and there's a lot of things you got to look out for. The way I ended up solving this problem was I had to buy control arms that were shorter. The only place I could find them, most people sell a 5/8 inch shorter control arm. This is a Mustang 2 suspension. I bought lower control arms from a place called Shell Valley, who also makes a Cobra, and they had a full 1 inch shorter control arm. I only bought the lowers. I did not buy the uppers from them. What I chose to do in the uppers is, I don't know if you can see, it doesn't matter, but I cut them and made them shorter and re-welded them together. So, just to save money and make sure I had what I wanted. And there's some other issues. I had bought some adjustable control arms and they didn't clear around. This has kind of a big, it's got this section here that holds the coil over that's really wide and takes up a lot of room. So the set of adjustables I bought didn't fit. So I just made these work, and I have not had this car aligned yet. It's close, but hopefully they'll be able to have enough adjustment in this to get it aligned properly and all that when I take it in to somebody that knows what they're doing there. So in the manual, and I'll show you the manual in a minute, this is a mistake I made. Very important. It tells you in the manual to put your wheels and tires on and get the body centered on the frame. And then they basically tell you to rivet the body to the frame, just using little pop rivets. I didn't like that. I ended up, I did it the hard way. I drilled a bunch of holes, and I think I drilled and tapped into the frame for, I don't know if it was 5/16 or 3/8. I forget, but I did a bunch of those, and that was a lot of work. But I felt better about it than those little tiny rivets they gave you. I didn't want this body coming off. But, this is not, it's not really a safe car anyways. You crash this car, you're done. But anyways, that's what I did there. But very important, I didn't do it. I would really listen to them and get your wheels and tires that you want to use early in the build. Put them on once you get your roller done. Put those on and center your body up accordingly. I wish I had done that. We just measured, took various measurements from the frame to the body, and it's not bad, but I would say my body is probably mounted on the frame a little bit crooked, maybe about 3/8 of an inch or so. It's not a lot, but when you spend a lot of time on something like this, every little thing bugs you. Somebody else may not notice that, but I notice it, and there's ways of fixing it, but without taking the body back off. Because, it would be an act of God, honestly, to reset this body at this point. Everything's been done, so that's just not a viable option. I would rather, cut and weld and move the positions of the wheels and things if I need to. But honestly, it's pretty damn close right now. And I did once I get the alignment a little bit better, it looks a lot better. So I'm pretty happy with it at this point. But I would say, that's one major mistake I made. So very important there. So a lot of things, like this roll bar, the way they told you, they give you a dimension, from the top of the bar down to the body, I think of like 10 inches or something. And we tried that, and it looked really short, and it looked goofy, and it would definitely not ever protect you. I don't honestly think this roll bar would protect you if you were to roll over anyways. It's kind of more decorative, but I did adjust the brackets. I don't know if we can see that or not. Probably not. Let's try to look. It's pretty dark in here, but basically they give you some brackets to mount this roll bar. And I don't remember exactly what I did, but I moved them up some. I did some shimming and some weird stuff. Honestly, I probably should have just extended the tubing. That would have been easier than what I did. Roll bar actually took a lot of time just because I didn't like the way it sat, from, A&C, the way they did it. So that was something that, just a personal preference. The other thing, if you go with the top loader with this original style shifter, this is a Mustang shifter, This whole section is a lot higher from the factory, and you won't be able to use this type of shifter. So what I had to do is I had to cut this all out and then lower it and refiberglass it. I honestly should have probably went, I don't know, maybe another ½ inch lower if I was to do it again, but because what happens is this boot ends up too high, and then you can't work the shifter like you're supposed to. Again, another thing, I had to have that original shifter. I just really wanted that. So that was a lot of work to reglass that. I didn't have any fiberglass experience, so I did that. This parking brake handle, this is a low car handle. It's it's too short. I mean, you can't really get enough leverage on it to really lock it down, and it's kind of like I feel about a lot of low cost stuff. It looks good, but doesn't really function that well. But I shouldn't say that, but just my opinion. But that's something I need to address at some point. Find a way to make the parking brake work better, because it's pretty well useless. I mean, it works, it comes on, but it wouldn't really stave this car from rolling down a steep hill. You know, I mean, obviously you can put it in gear and it'll probably be fine, but not a big deal. But just something I thought I'd mention to you. A much longer handle on that would be better. And I didn't really want to. I know a lot of guys mount the handle like inside here, like the original. Wasn't really a lot of room with these seats to do that. I just felt it was easier to put it up top. Just little preferences. Another thing I'll mention is I did the Stuart Warner gauges, because a lot of these had Stuart Warners. A lot of them had the Smiths. The Smiths are a lot more expensive. In hindsight, what I didn't realize, I would have went with the Smiths, honestly, and the reason is because your tack and speedometer on the Smiths that are much larger diameter, and these are kind of small. And they're fine. I mean, they'll work or whatever, but I wish I had gone with the Smiths, honestly. Not a big deal there. You can go whatever gauges you want. It's not really that important. Certainly not going to change how the car feels as far as if you just wanted to drive like an original. So you got that there. I didn't bother with the 5-point harness and all that for the seat belts. I mean, let's be honest. This car is a death trap. I don't really see what good that 5-point harness is going to do you if you really get in a serious accident. Just my opinion. I'm not promoting lack of safety, but one thing you got to realize about using those kind of harnesses is you're really only going to get it on this side with the roll bar, where you can mount the top shoulder straps up on the bar. On the passenger side, you don't have a roll bar. If you want to add a roll bar, then then probably that 5-point harness or whatever is the way to go. But I figured if I'm not going to allow the passenger to have that, why should I? I do intend to have a passenger. But what I've seen people do, and I want to make it clear, never do this. I've seen a lot of guys, they would put slots in this back wall and run those top straps through here and then screw them into the frame, inside the trunk in the back. But never do that unless you're really short, because it's gonna, if you get in an impact, when you get lunged forward, if the strap is lower than your shoulder, it's going to crush your spine. So I've seen a lot of guys do that. I see the straps coming out of here. Don't do it. It'd probably be okay for a kid or something because the straps would still be, you know, above their shoulders. But if you can't get those top straps up higher than your shoulders, don't use those. Very important there. It was something I never really thought of. And I don't know, either somebody told me that or I read it somewhere, I can't remember, but it's eye-opening, you know, the geometry there. So, you know, a couple things I did different. I ended up doing my own wiring for the car. I had, you know, one of those pre-made wiring kits, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. I just didn't want to use it, and partly because the fuse box was up under the dash, and I didn't like that. Once this car's together, to get up under the dash and replace a fuse or something just seemed like a nightmare. So what I did, and this is kind of goofy, but I'll show you. Open the trunk here. So I got all my, this is my fuse panel, and I made this plate that I stuck here, and I don't know, maybe I'll cover this with something so it doesn't look so, you know, messy, but everything's mounted on this board. My turn signal flashes and all my relays and everything's right there. I've got everything labeled. Troubleshooting, replacing fuses and all that, real easy. Everything's just right there. Doesn't look super pretty, but I really didn't care what it looked like inside the trunk, I'll be honest. I got my battery in here, inside a battery box. And, you know, that was it there. So that's all up to you, what you want to do there. And you know, this wiring harness I made, I soldered everything. One thing you'll learn with this fiberglass car, you got to run a lot of ground wires. Things just don't ground because everything's fiberglass. So, one thing that's weird is this trunk latch. It doesn't work very well. I don't like it. At some point, I'm going to redesign this because it just doesn't work that well. At least I couldn't get it to work well. This is what A&C gives you. So here's another weird thing about this car that I've noticed. This seems to be unique to this car, is that this handle for the trunk is not on the trunk, it's actually on the body. And that's kind of different, you know. I don't have a lot of room for my license plate, so I've got to make a special holder for that. And I was always curious as to why they did it this way. I don't know. You know, I remember that Ford versus Ferrari movie. They had come out with some kind of rule in the racing class where you had to fit like a luggage bag or something in the trunk. And I remember, I don't know, they showed Ken Miles or some nonsense. It wouldn't fit in this car, so he just took a hammer and he beat the shag out of the trunk and dented it all up so that the bag would fit. So I just wonder if whatever body these guys originally molded might have been from the original, this car was made by AC in Britain. I wonder if, it had, this area was really short and maybe had this latch down here. I don't know, or I guess A&C probably decided to move this here so you could fit your license plate. This was probably always in the trunk, but probably on the original A&C car, I don't think in Britain they don't have the same license plates we do, and they probably didn't mount it here. I think they were usually kind of mounted down here on the side because they had a license plate that it's not as tall as an American plate and it's longer. So it's kind of short and wide, where ours is, a little bit closer to square. So, I don't know if that has something to do with it, but, and maybe like the later versions of the Cobras where they had to fit that luggage bag, they made this trunk taller, and this is just not modeled after that revision that they did. I don't know, there's a lot of speculation as to what these cars really looked like, but they were handmade. There's no right or wrong to it. I kind of got obsessed for a while where I wanted everything to be, original, but I kept one thing in mind, that these were race cars, and they were built as such, and they were one-offs. They were never an assembly line car, and there's a lot of variation, so I don't think there's any right or wrong to it. But I don't know. The engine mounts and everything that they gave us and dimensions seemed to work just fine. It was easy to mount the motor. No issues there. Steering column was a little tricky. Now let's go around. I'll kind of show you. There's one variation I did. Because like if you look over here, if you look, your wheel is really close to the door. And it's really kind of tricky getting getting this in the right position for me was difficult. Especially if I didn't have the wheel at first and you don't really know, and that was a little tricky. One thing I had to do, if you look, it's a muffler clamp here, basically. There is a pedestal that this muffler clamp bolts to, and I don't think we can see it. It's so tight in here now, but the pedestal is supposed to mount outside of this box. But what I ended up doing was I ended up cutting a slot in the top of the box and mounting the pedestal on the other side. And the reason I did that is because it angled the steering wheel more this way to give me more room between the door. So my hand, I haven't driven this a lot. I have driven it some, but surprisingly my hand doesn't seem to hit the door. But we'll see as I drive it more. This dash, man, they tell you to basically put like a wood screw up through this flange and go into the dash, and also over here. But if you look, I don't know if you can tell, but you really weren't gonna get a screw in there. It was pretty Mickey Mouse, honestly. What I did, like if you see that screw there, I made a bracket for it to screw there instead, and then I made a bracket so there's a screw on that end, and then the same thing on this end, and then you have the two screws along this side panel here. This section here, original Cobras don't have. I chose to leave it because it gave the dash stability. I guess it's there if you want to put a radio or something in it, and I don't know. I think there may be a law against putting a radio in a Cobra. I don't know. When you hear these things fire up, you don't want to listen to the radio. And good luck listening to the radio too. But I've got a plaque with my VIN number and stuff I got to put on there. Because when you register these, they give you a VIN number. At least the state of Texas does. I don't know about other states. You have a manufacturer number, but then the state issues you an actual VIN number for the vehicle. Another thing I did different on the dash was they tell you to, if you look down here, they tell you to basically cut a big slot. I didn't want that. I wanted to leave all this. So I just made a hole, and then I made this trim ring to go around it and dress it up some. That was something I did, not something you could buy. And I did the same thing on the roll bar. I made these trim rings for it because they give you a rubber ring, and if these don't come out perfectly centered in the hole, it really messes up the rubber piece, and it just didn't look that good. So I just made those little trim rings for it. Again, not something you can buy, but there are kits that have something like that. It's still got rubber in it, but so I didn't do that. Oh yeah, the other thing too, I learned, I didn't know this. For some reason I wanted it to say AC on the wheel. I didn't want Cobra, I didn't want it plain, I didn't want anything else, but what I learned is that these cars didn't have a horn button. The horn button was on the dash. And you see I got a button there, but that's my starter. This horn actually works. I modified that piece. I bought a wheel that had a working horn button, and then I bought this AC piece, which is expensive too, by the way. And I can't remember, but I modified it and put it on there, so it kind of has that look, but when you push it, it'll actually beep the horn. I've got the power off, so it's not working, but so I did that. That was just a touch I added. Added these tinted visors at the top. Depending on how tall you are, I mean, it's a pretty small car. You're kind of looking you're kind of looking over the window. You know, I'm not very tall, but even myself, you know, I still kind of look over the window when I sit in this thing. And so I put those up. I don't ever, there's no need to flip them down, you know, you just kind of leave them up. That's really where you're looking most of the time, honestly. But, oh, let's see. So another thing that was tricky. So you have this door latch, and one thing I ran into, you see this pin that's in here, moving it back and forth. This pin goes inside this hole, and that pin really, it didn't even fit inside the hole. The hole was kind of too small. So I opened this hole up so it would fit inside there, because man, I couldn't get these doors to latch. I thought it just wasn't lined up, because you got this bracket here. This is a headache, honestly. Getting this in the right position. You can't see it because I got carpet in there, but man, what a pain that was. You basically shimming it with washers and things, and whatever you got to do to get this in the right position to line up with this deal. And that was kind of a pain, you know, and it works okay, you know. It does what it's supposed to. I don't think any of them are that good. And if you look inside the wheel well, you can see those two nuts right there. That is for that door latch. And again, you got a curved, crazy piece of fiberglass there. Trying to mount a bracket on it and get it in a good position. That's kind of tricky. Other thing too, they give you this carpet, and because I changed the hump in the middle, the carpet didn't really fit right, so I had to do a lot of cutting, and I'm not an upholstery guy. If you look down in here, you can see I got bare fiberglass showing. I didn't do a very good job on the carpet, but I don't care. You know, it looks good enough. Again, my goal was to make it like an old race car, I wasn't trying to be super perfect with it. I just wanted it to run good and, you know, and have the thrill, basically. So I think it's achieved that. I'm not worried about little things like that. So I think of things as I go. So this little prop rod for the hood, I put a piece of shrink tubing on it, because what happens is it sits down here. I added this little clip. It sits down in this clip when it's at rest, so if the engine's hot, when you open the hood and you go to grab this thing, very hot from your header, and it'll burn you. So I put that piece of tubing on there. That seems to have done the trick. That turkey pan on the carburetor, that's a pain, you know. You really don't need it, but it's a pain to deal with, you know, in all honesty. Taking the carb on and off, and just everything's got a snake through it. I had to make some modifications on it to get it to fit in there, but not hard stuff. But if you don't love this turkey pan, don't bother with it. Between the price and the serviceability, and you can see I made my own copper lines. I don't like that braided stuff. It's just a preference. So yeah, I worked for a plumbing company for a while before you guys start making fun of me. But yeah, so I did that. Other thing I did too, you know, a lot of these had the overflow tank here. And as much as I like the overflow tank, it's just another thing in the way. You know, it's right here. It takes up room. It's harder to work on the vehicle. So I just got one of these little, I don't know, these little filler necks here and put that in. And if you're wondering what this is, these are cool. What these are, they're a shrinkable hose clamp. So it's like a piece of shrink tube, and you just slip it over there and heat it with a heat gun, and it shrinks up tight and holds the hose on there. They're really cool. I like them, because I had a lot of hose clamps, and you know, it's kind of a permanent assembly. You have to cut it off. I left a hose clamp here, so if I ever want to, remove the radiator or something. So I still have clamps where I want to be able to detach it, but I kind of permanently put that in. Not that you can't get those off, you can, but not as easy as a hose clamp. And that's one thing, too, that's tricky, man, is your radiator hoses. I mean, they don't give you a set of radiator hoses with this, so... Oh, there's an old-timey auto parts store in town here, really nice old guys in it, and they just let me go in the back room and pull down hoses, and I just kept looking for stuff I could use. This is made up of probably 4 different hoses, and you can see some more of these clamps here. I had to go, this FE has a really big water neck, and then it's much smaller at the radiator, so I had to reduce down. So I made a coupling that reduced it down. I couldn't find one. I had to make one. I'm sure somebody's got this stuff, but and then I used that shrinkable wrap on there, and I did the same thing over here. You can see a splice. This hose was pretty simple. But I think it was, roughly 4 different radiator hoses that I bought. And I cut sections out of them to get this to do what I wanted. That took some time. I probably spent a good 45 minutes in the pot store pulling down hoses, off the wall with the little hook and all that. But that was kind of crazy. Little things like that you don't really think about kind of hold you up on the process. You don't expect to spend a weekend getting radiator hoses hooked up, So let's see. This car comes with that original throttle linkage, original style throttle linkage, which I really like. Much cooler than the cable that you get with a lot of other kits. I think that's pretty slick. Well, it's kind of complex, but it works really well. And I had to... They give you... I used threaded rod here. I used stainless steel threaded rod, quarter 28. They gave you just pieces of steel, and then they told you to take a die and thread it yourself. It was just easier to buy the threaded rod. It's just a few dollars, and it's stainless, so much easier there. Just little things. These universal joints, buy good ones. Don't buy cheap knockoff ones. I will tell you that. They fit better, and you don't want these to break. You'll lose your steering, so don't skimp on those U-joints. I had to have... You can buy these. We had somebody machine this shaft, I think, but it does a lot of them. It was pretty cheap, but you need this shaft with the D on it, on each end. I don't know. That came from a local machine shop. I can't remember, but... So I guess if you guys got questions on this car, let me know, because I'm sure there's a lot of things that I forget. I know one thing I can tell you. This louver here, they tell you to basically Bondo it in, but man, I had a hard time with that. And what I recommend you do is put some tabs on it, like, use a screw and put like 4 tabs on it. That'll make it much easier to Bondo it in. It was very difficult to do like this. And it's not a big deal, but that ended up being real tricky. That was nerve-wracking. You got to cut this yourself because you don't know where it's going to come out. Killed me to do it. But it really wasn't that bad. You just go slow, Just got a little at a time. And so one big disadvantage of the gel coat body is, you essentially are working on a painted car the whole time. And if you have an accident, I don't mean like an accident driving the car, but, a tool falls on it or something, and you chip it, you have to repair it. And it's really not that bad. I didn't have fiberglass experience when I started this, and I still don't, but I had somebody helping me, and I honestly don't know if it was this side or the other side, but they dropped the door and they took a big chunk out of it, and I was beside myself. I called up A&C, and they sent me a little bottle of the gel coat. So what you do is you sand it all down, and I built it up with tape, and I filled it in with the gel coat and let it dry, and then you just wet sand it and buff it just like you would a, you know, normal paint job or whatever. And honestly, I don't know which side was broken. At first there was a color difference in it that I could see, and I was like, it's not too bad, that's fine. But as the resin cured, it blended right in. I don't even know which side it was now. I don't know if it was driver or passenger. So that's pretty cool. This steering column here, I'm going to say this too. Just buy everything from ANC. You know, unless you've just got a vision on something, everything you can buy from ANC, just buy it from ANC, because it makes your life a lot easier. The stuff will fit. I found the price to be good, you know, because there's some things that, you know, you think, oh, I can get that cheaper. I don't know. I really was hard pressed to get a better price on the stuff they were selling. They were really reasonable and everything. And the only thing about those guys, if you're the kind of guy that's going to be freaking out because you want it shipped right away, they may take a few days to ship it. You know, they're not, you know, they're a busy place. And, you know, if you're one of these guys, you're trying to rush something in for the weekend, you may be disappointed in that sense. You gotta be patient with these guys. They are busy, but Ron, who is the tech, I don't know if he still is, but Ron's very knowledgeable and very helpful, but he's very difficult to get on the phone, so expect to wait a few days for a call back. You gotta accept that. I can't be freaking out at them. So, but the guy's very good when you do get him on the phone. Other thing I did is I wanted the racing bumpers. The kit tells you to put the full street bumpers on it. This is a pain because this car's not designed for them. And one of the things about these, it's got these rubber grommets and they come out at an angle. It's very tricky. You know, I had to make brackets to get these to fit, and then you have to do these cutouts very carefully to get these rubber pieces to fit right, because if they're off a little bit, they won't go in and they'll bunch up and look like crap. And it's a lot of work, honestly, to put these little racing bumpers on. You'd think they would be easier, but they're actually more difficult than putting the full street bumper on it. But again, I wanted this to look like a race car, so I bought these, and I think I bought this stainless tubing. I don't think that even came with the racing bumpers. I think it got the nuts. I think it just came with the nuts and threaded rod, but I wanted them covered with a stainless. So I got some stainless tubing to do that. That was just something I did. That's mostly it. I've got a problem with the clutch pedal effort. The clutch is, I mean, you got to be Lou Ferrigno to push the clutch in. It's kind of uncomfortable to drive. And I've got the Willwood master cylinder and matching slave cylinder, but it's still pretty hard, uncomfortable clutch. I bought a hydraulic throwout bearing. I'm going to try replacing the slave cylinder with that. We'll see how that goes. I'll probably do a video on that. Let me throw this up on the lift real quick so you guys can see underneath. I'll show you that slave cylinder setup that I did. I've had 2 or 3 different ones so far. So I'm hoping the hydraulic throwout bearing is it. That'll be the last thing I do. Okay, give me a minute. Let's get this up on the rack real quick. I'll show you a couple other things, but I think that's about it. You know, overall, the car, you got to expect to do some fabrication. Some of these things just don't fit like the instructions tell you. And there may be some things that you want done that maybe the kit doesn't do. Like I said, it's, you know, I wanted these goofy, you know, knockoff pin drive wheels and all that stuff. And, you know, there's nothing better about them, you know, other than they look cool. These tires are technically not even street legal, but there's just nothing that looks like that. They just look good in this car, you know. I don't know. I just like it. I chose not to do the stripe because I figured, well, it being a gel coat car, I didn't want to have to paint that stripe on. I guess you could maybe have somebody do a sticker. But, you know, I figured everybody does a stripe, so I just did it my way. That number 6 means something to me, means nothing to you, but that's kind of an inside joke, that number 6. And I enjoyed this build, I really did. And I'd like to do it again. I think I'm going to build a Daytona coupe when I have some money and time. So my plan is to do a Daytona coupe. I will document that build better than this. But, you know, for the most part, the car's pretty straightforward. So it's a simple car. And, you know, just if things are not going together like you want it to, sometimes you just kind of throw the book away and just think of a way to make it work. You know, there's no right or wrong to this. Just do what you got to do and get it done. And just solve one problem at a time, you know. Everything's kind of difficult in its own way, but if you just don't overwhelm yourself, you know, because you'll be working on it and there'll be 4 things that you're trying to do and none of them will fit and you're not sure. Just pick one, concentrate on it, get it done, then go to the next one. You know, that's my best advice. It doesn't sound like much, but it's easy to get overwhelmed. I think a lot of people don't finish these kind of cars, really. They just think, well, I don't have the talent, I don't have the time. You do. It's just, you got to have the patience, you know. I'm not a professional car builder or anything. I mean, I'm fortunate in the sense that I have a machinist background and I've got a lot of tools and things, but you can do a lot with, you know, just a bench vise and some Dremel tools and a grinder and, you know, a set of drill bits and a cordless drill or even corded drill. Doesn't have to be a cordless drill, but you know what I'm saying. Maybe get a little cheap $200 drill press. You know, just some stuff like that, you know, and you can do an awful lot. It might take you a little longer, but there's nothing wrong with that stuff. So let's put this up real quick. I'm going to end this video. It's gone pretty long. I'll end this. If you guys have questions on it, maybe I'll compile the questions and I'll do another video to address that. So if you got questions, please put it in the comments. So let's get this on the rack, and I'll be back in 1 second. All right, so little tiny drive shaft. I actually made my own drive shaft. Denny's drive shaft had a little do-it-yourself kit. I did that myself. Not that you have to, but saved myself a little bit there. And yeah, so I made this deal here, this kind of goofy bracket that holds this slave cylinder. And it's just pulling on the original fork. Like I said, it's kind of tough. So I'm going to put a hydraulic throw-up bearing in it. And originally this car had, instead of these types of lower control arms, because I added these, I think the kit has changed and they have this style of lower control arm now too, but it used to have the other style that had the strut rod that went to here, and you can see where I cut that original bracket off. So, and which is good because on the FE it got in the way of the oil filter. You can always do a remote oil filter kit and all that, but I didn't have to do that because we cut those off. So we ended up with this style. I had to convert it over. You know, another thing I'll say, I use these, they're like a GM single piston caliper for the brakes, thinking, well, you know, these cars are so light, you don't really need 4 piston or 6 piston and all that. It's going to stop just fine. But I will say this, I regret the decision buying this Chinese way stuff, because a 4 piston or 6 piston would have been better, because you're not going to get power brakes in this car, and the pedal effort for the brakes is kind of tough. It's not, you know, it's not terrible, but it does take a little bit more effort than I'd like it to. So I think the 4 pistons would have been better, you know. But it works. It's fine for now, but don't cheap out on the brakes. Just go get the good 4 piston or 6 piston stuff. Don't bother with this GM stuff. And it's all Chinese made now. I had problems with them, the banjo fittings just wanting to leak, and you can see it's not leaking anymore, but I had a hell of a time with that. That's a long story in itself, but in any case, if you have power brakes, these are fine, you know. And another thing I'll tell you is I've had to move this proportioning block, because they tell you to plumb all your brakes and fuel in and everything before you have the body on and all that, but I don't know, you know, it's, I would almost tell you to do it later, because you don't really know where things are going to end up. I do now that it's done, but, and there's my little Chrysler ballast resistor I mounted down here, which is kind of goofy, but that's from my fan. So yeah, you know, it's not a show winner under here, but it's not bad. I made my own harnesses, and they're pretty thick, and there's just no room to run them under the carpet and things. I ran a lot of wire along the frame like this. I don't know if that's the best idea or not, but you know, man, you do what you got to do. I don't know what to say there, but I used a piece of copper refrigeration tubing from my fuel line. It bends easy to flange and all that stuff. So anyways, so if you guys got other questions on this, just please put it all in the comments, and then I will look that over and do another video and address anything if I need to. Maybe you fell asleep by now. Maybe you fell asleep probably a half hour ago. But, okay, next project on this, we're going to change the throw-out bearing. So I'll probably let you know how that went. Alright guys, thanks for watching.